Okay, now we're live. Yeah, we should be live right now.
So we're live and we're the first ones. I'm the guinea pig.
Wait, what is this thing? Starting soon. Uh, okay.
Hello?
Okay. Okay, yeah, there you go. Okay, see. Okay, now we're going. Okay, now we're live. All right, so welcome everyone to first official Free by Sound Festival. 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 Thanks everyone for being here. Starting kicking on our first and awesome, uh, series of sessions and panels. We got the awesome and always charming Glenn Garland. You may know from his work on Rob Zombie's films like Halloween, Halloween 2, The Devil Rejects, and also TV series like also he edited the last film from Rob Zombie 2, 31, cool movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it. And we also the TV series Vampire Diaries. So thanks, Glenn, for being here.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's kick off this right with first question. All right. So everyone wants to be a director or a producer or an actor. What brought you to the editing world?
Well, I actually didn't want to necessarily be the director or the producer. I wanted to be a storyteller, and I felt like editing was one of the best ways to do that. When I'm on a set, things are really chaotic. Things are sort of out of my control. There's a lot of people who are sort of running the show, and there's a lot of different people who are going in different directions. Whereas with editing, you have what you have, and you get to work one-on-one with the director and really craft and hone the story. You know, it's sort of like being a sculptor and taking these great pieces of rock and sculpting them into something that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm actually a film student, so we get to hear about the development of a story, how it starts with the screenwriter, then it changes the story during the production. Then we got in the editing room how the story changes once more. So I also heard some rumors about editors and you know. Editors and directors not getting along too well. So have you ever been through something like that before?
I mean, fortunately, I've had really good experiences with my directors. We usually, when we have an interview, you can tell that there's a good connection or not such a good connection. And so whenever I'm meeting with a director, they're sort of feeling me out, I'm feeling them out to sort of see whether we have a similar worldview and whether we seem like we're going to be able to get along. Because when you're sitting in a room as long as you are with the director, you know, sometimes 12, 18 hours a day, day in and day out, sometimes 6, 7 days a week, you have to like that person. So, you know, you definitely want to make sure that you get on the right foot. I remember when I first started, there was a director who is no longer with us, but I don't want to mention his name, who that first experience was kind of hard, and it kind of taught me that you really want to work with people who you enjoy working with. But he was sort of very difficult. I was 20. I was still in film school, and I was editing his film at night and on the weekends, and he was in his 60s, and so he used to joke around that he had underwear that was older than I was. And when I would sort of tell him, you know, that I disagreed with him and things like that, he'd basically say, "Shut up, you snot-nosed." I know better than you do. So in that, I kind of learned like you really want to work with people who you respect, people who you like, people who you really feel like they have a vision that you feel is especially close to yours, so that you're not arguing or fighting.
Yeah. So, speaking of fighting, you mentioned sometimes, these big productions, they've got editors who are hired, but sometimes they, work close to directors, or they're chosen, or they're hired by the director. You know, um, no, what's the, what? No, how would you say? How do you, in your case, how do you know how to work? What director will work better with you? Do you look at his vision? Do you at his vision? Do you look at the story? What pushes you to go after that
Well,
movie?
it really starts with sort of the script. Do you, when you read the script, is it something that you feel like you really feel a close connection with? And if you don't, then there's no point in just trying to get the job to get the job. You really want to try to be a part of something that you feel like that this is something special. And usually, if you respond to the script, the director, and you assume has responded to the script, because why would they be working so hard on something like this? And so you start talking about the script and what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, what you think it works really well, it's all about the characters, it's all about the story and the evolution. And once you start talking about that, you really get a sense of who the director is and what they're all about.
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, you focus a lot on the script. So I understand, like I mentioned before, the script tends to change from productions stages. So when you speak about script, I'm guessing at first you're already planning on what to change or what not to change, or how does that happen?
No, I mean, when I first edit a film, I put in everything. I don't sort of start going, well, that's not a good scene, I'm not going to give it my all. You really sort of try to make every scene as good as it possibly can be, even if you feel like it's not serving the story, even if you don't think it's pushing forward the film. So I really do try to give everything its due. And even later on when I'm working with the director and the scene's not working so well, we really try to keep honing it and trying to make it work before we toss it out. And sometimes it's just a matter of entering the scene in the middle of it, or getting out of the scene at the height of the conflict. Films, as far as editing goes, the rhythm is so important, because with the rhythm, you want to make sure that you're ahead of the audience. And if people are sort of entering a scene and walking into a room, sitting down, and then starting to talk, that's not as exciting as starting right in the middle of the scene. Also, as far as like the end of the scene, if they sort of go, okay, that's great, let's go, and then they walk out, that's also not as good. You want to get out at the height of the conflict. And so, but those are things that I'm keeping in my mind. When I first do a first cut, I have the entrances, I have the exits, but I know what I can get in, and I know how to get in and get out later when we start editing away. Because what works in a script, and sometimes even works on set, doesn't necessarily work as a film. And so a lot of times you'll put things in a script, but then visually you'll get that information much quicker than you would have if you read something. Because when you start seeing people's eyes and you start seeing their emotions, you get things a lot quicker than maybe you would in a script. So sometimes somebody's eyes might say something that is then in the script, and it's almost more interesting to tell it without actually saying it. In fact, I think that one of the most one of the things that I'm most careful about when I'm cutting a scene is making sure that I'm getting the subtext, because when a script is written really well, it's all about the subtext. People are usually not saying exactly what they mean. They're usually saying something a little bit off, and you're getting the subtext of the scenes by people's reactions and by them sort of keeping some of their motives off to the side. So it's all about trying to get at the subtext and what the characters are thinking and feeling about what's being said at the time.
Well, speaking of thinking about first before the thinking and all stuff, you mentioned the eyes. Now, I was looking once a while back at this documentary on editing, and one thing that I understand is that so many editors try to avoid the eyes. When the close-ups are pretty risky because they if when someone is looking right, like when an actor is looking right at the camera, some people think no, it loses its touches, it doesn't become cinematic anymore, or it breaks the fourth wall. How do you work that out?
Well, I mean, I think that the eyes are the most important part of editing, and you sometimes want to use close-ups sparingly because they're so powerful when you want to make sure that you don't always use that close-up in your toolbox until you really need it. That being said, sometimes when you're tight, you can get really into the mindset of what's going on with the characters. But as far as the eyes go, and when you say breaking the fourth wall, generally you don't break the fourth wall unless you really want the audience that they're in on the joke. In certain movies, when a character does look at the camera, it's great, but you have to make sure that you do it knowing that you're going to pull the audience out of the film experience and that they're now going to become part of the process.
Yes, I know one of the genres, the movie cinematic genres, that use a lot of the views and how the people expressions and the feelings that are in their eyes, in their action, in their mood, in everything. It's gonna be now horror and probably drama too, but your drama, sorry, horror. So how do you, following my last question, how do you try to avoid the fourth wall, but at the same time, bringing out the expressions in the eyes of the people?
Well, I mean, usually the actors are not looking at the camera, so you don't have to really worry about breaking the fourth wall that much. What you really are trying to do is trying to see if there's truth in those eyes, because sometimes when an actor is saying a line, they believe it or they're saying it, and if they believe it, that will probably be in the eyes. The way that they say it and the way that they look. If they're really truly believing that line, they'll be focused. But if you're if something's believable, you feel it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, speaking of of horror, now there's many type of scaring people, and one thing in this particular director, which you have worked before, Rob Zombie, he has some pretty much he has done some gory stuff. He always just add some gory elements to his movie, but now it's on some gory stuff like Saw, some classic horror. He also remake, as many of us know, the Halloween. So let's kick off with Halloween, which I understand you have worked on it. We know this is a remake. When you were editing the movie, did you take in consideration the previous work done by the editor of Halloween?
I mean, when I cut Rob's Halloween, I knew that Rob was going to do a different take on his Halloween as opposed to the original, because he felt like the original already existed in the zeitgeist, and there was no reason to try to redo that film. So, I mean, I watched it and I thought that it's brilliant. It's a masterpiece, but we were going to do something different with Rob's version of it. Carpenter is a genius, and I believe that in his original one there was a lot fewer cuts, and he stretched things out. But with Rob, 20 or 30 years had passed, and Rob wanted to do something that was even more visceral and much more like a little bit more in the style of Devil's Rejects. With Devil's Rejects, he wanted it to feel like you are a spectator in the room, like you're a fly on the wall and you're there. And he wanted to really get that visceral feeling, almost like a documentary cinema verite feeling from it. And so with Halloween, we went with a similar vibe. We wanted it to really feel like you were there with Michael Myers and going on that journey.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about the original film. There's a classic scene where we go through the mask. We feel like we're Michael Myers. So yeah, you know what I mean. Speaking of horror, for all the years out there, what draw you onto this particular style?
Well, I mean, I had never done much in the way of horror before I worked with Rob. When I read Devil's Rejects, I thought it was a really smart, powerful script, and I decided that I would meet with them. But I was never really that much of a horror aficionado at the time. And when I met with Rob, it was sort of an interesting interview because he had already seen a few movies that I had cut, and he basically talked to me for a very short period of time. And one of the things I asked him was, do you want this to be cut like House of a Thousand Corpses? Because I don't feel like this should be cut like that. Not that House of a Thousand Corpses is bad. I think it's brilliant, but I didn't feel like Devil's Rejects should be cut like that. House of a Thousand Corpses has more of this almost music video feel to it, and I felt like Devil's Rejects should be much more real, much more centered. And so I said, do you want it cut like that? And he's like, no, I feel like it should be more like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind meets what's the other movie that he said? There was another movie, but basically he wanted it to feel much more visceral, much more real. And so that was one of the things. And the other thing is, I said, Rob, not that I want to lose this job, but I'm not a horror editor. I haven't done much in this genre. And he goes, that's exactly why I want to hire you. I don't want my horror films to feel like other people's horror films. I don't want this to be defined by the genre. I want it to excel outside of the genre. I want this just to be a good, strong movie that just happens to be a horror film. Saw Devil's Rejects even much more of like a revenge picture, a road picture. And Halloween, it's more pure horror, but even though it's a slasher and even though it's in that genre, he wanted it to feel like this could be a drama. This could be really getting into the psyche of a character, a mythic character, rather than this is about people being chased and killed.
Yes, yes, I know what you mean. Sadly, there has been some great horror movies in the past few years, but they'll go name by the numbers. So yeah, I like the way how he rubs, delivers his particular style, how he uses some kind of exploit horror film. You watch 100,000 Corpse or Corpse or Halloween, you get this feel from old horror movies, a la Texas Chainsaw Massacre. No, not the new ones, but the originals. So yeah, in that case, what do you look for this then on those when you're working with Rob? You look at those particular films or
I mean, I since Devil's Rejects have watched almost everything in the genre, but I also I just like good filmmaking, and if you care about the characters, I mean that's the one thing that you should be always focused on when you're cutting, not necessarily trying to copy what other people have done, but really go, how can I really get into the character's psyche? How can you really feel like you're living with them? For instance, there's a scene in Devil's Rejects where this family is in a hotel room and they're being sort of tortured and sort of uh, played with by the killers, and it's a scene with a gun, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
And that scene, it what we wanted to do is really get in the headspace of those characters. What the husband's thinking, what the wife's feeling, what the other couple are feeling watching this, what Sherry's feeling, what Otis is feeling. Sort of get into what is going on with the characters, and have different shots that really kind of show what everyone's thinking and feeling. The other thing that Rob likes to do is he likes to go handheld with a lot of stuff because he feels like handheld's messier. It feels more real. It feels less safe. Sometimes when things are on a tripod, things
Yeah.
are not. They feel a little bit safer because they're more staged. They're more symmetrical. When things are a little bit shaky, it feels a little bit more like anything can happen. You don't feel as safe. The other thing that Rob likes to do is he likes to sort of build the suspense rather than have the jump scares. Uh,
Mhm.
we both kind of feel like jump scares work sometimes, but for the most part, we want to avoid them because jump scares feel false and phony. It's just sort of like, oh, okay, let's have somebody jump out of nowhere. That is not true terror. What's true terror is sort of the buildup. It's
Yeah.
sort of like the whole Hitchcock thing with the suspense versus surprise, where it's like you're on a train and you show the bomb under the table before it blows up. If you show the bomb under the table before it blows up as these people are talking, that's suspense. If you just suddenly have it blow up, that's surprise. And we feel like sometimes you get more out of a scene if you build up the suspense rather than you go for the surprise.
Yes, totally. I totally agree with that. So, no, you mentioned building up the suspense. No, as an editor, so how do you exactly do that as an editor? How do you build the scene? How do you choose the scenes? How do you usually work building up? No, because okay, we got the script, we got the scenes, but now it's your turn as an editor to build up the suspense. Basically, we got the script, everything is there, but in some way between you and I don't know, maybe that in this case, if you are like maybe James Wan or something like that, that uses a lot of music. Maybe it's all about the editor. How do you build then the suspense? How do you choose what scenes are best and what scenes are not?
Well, I mean, I think that as far as suspense goes, you have to sort of like pick and choose. If you're doing suspense in every scene, then it stops working. Sometimes if a film just sort of goes up to 11 and stays there, that's boring. You sort of want to have ebbs and flows. You want some things to be quick and some things to be slow. And if you're sort of if you're sort of if you're throwing off the rhythm, it keeps things much more interesting. It keeps people on their toes. So sometimes you'll play things quick so that then you can stretch out a scene. And then as far as like knowing how far to stretch, with suspense, you really do try to stretch it as far as you can. You just pull that rubber band as far out as you can without letting go. But if you pull it out too far, people start getting bored. So you just have to kind of really just feel it. It's all about you feeling the emotions. And it's tricky because sometimes when you've seen a scene 100 times, it doesn't feel suspenseful anymore. So that's where screenings come in. That's where it's really good to sort of sit in a room with other people and see if they're sort of on the edge of their seats. And then it's all about like music, as you said. At the beginning of a scene, you might want to have the music a little higher, and then just slowly, very slowly, start dipping it down lower and lower and lower until imperceptibly all the music's disappeared, so that then when it has reached its point, and then you hit it with something hard with what is going to actually then occur, then you raise it up to 11 from 0, and that's where you really jump. My grandfather was a concert violinist, and he used to play this one tune. I forget the name of it, but it was da 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 da. And it would go. And then it would get really, really quiet, and then all the bows would go, and then you go, and that sort of like, because it lulls you and then hits you hard. That's what really makes you sort of get pulled into a film, because it sort of draws you in very carefully, almost sort of like caresses you, come, and then once you've like leaned in as far as you can, then it like pushes you back so that you really get hit hard.
Yeah, speaking of music, one thing the horror and many terror movies does, they usually start with very gory, horrific scene, but then they build up, how to meet the families and all this stuff, but then they grow and they go up. Remember this film, The Conjuring 2, where they play the guitar in one scene, they're all happy and cheerful, all the demons were gone, and then all of a sudden, then the whole demon thing goes up, and you're like, what the hell? So yeah. Now you mentioned suspense and horror, but now in the case of the latest film by Mr. Rob Zombie, 31. I noticed in the trailer that there's a lot of gory. It kind of had that feel of, I don't know why, hostile meats. So when it comes to gory, when the main purpose pretty much is just blood and the limbs and interesting and all that stuff, how do you approach that to make it just not, I don't know, so torture porn, but more like how do you give the aesthetic, the art to rather violent and gory scene?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of times, maybe because I become desensitized to it, sometimes I don't really feel like Rob's movies are as gory as some of these others, and I do believe that, because there are times that when we go to the MPAA to see if we get our rating, sometimes they say it's not that there's any one scene, it just feels too intense. And it's not like they can point to, oh, that's really gory or that's really gory. Here we had less gore, And then we were made by the distributors to put more gore in, even though we really didn't want to, but they felt like, well, that's what the audience wants. And we feel like it's all about more about being in the character's headspace. I mean, yes, there's gore, and yes, you want people to be sort of like viscerally affected by what they're seeing. You don't want to just make it seem like it's cartoon violence. But, you know, and I have a problem sometimes when people go, well, cartoon violence is fine, but real violence isn't, because I feel like cartoon violence sort of makes people more violent in some ways. I think that when something's viscerally really violent, it makes them not want to look away. It doesn't glorify it. I think the key is don't glorify the violence. Make it so that it has a visceral impact on you, that you feel like this isn't good. This is not something that I feel comfortable with. And yes, 31 is very violent, but we try not to make it just gory. We try to make it more visceral. I think that a lot of times with Rob's movies, people think that they're more gory than they are, but if you really watch it carefully, there's not a lot. There is gore, but it's not as much as some movies. And I think it just feels more intense because of the shot choices we do, the pacing that we do, the writing that Rob does, the way he directs it. We use a lot of very tight close-ups to really get you into the headspace of the characters. And then I just feel like, you know, with his movies, we're not going for a torture porn at all. We're trying to avoid that at all costs.
Yes. Well, like you mentioned, definitely, what makes some great movies, especially at this journey, is, looking for the artist, the aesthetic, and not so much for the blood. Now, I remember that you mentioned you worked at the Rob Zombie's fake trailer the Grindhouse. So it makes me wonder, okay, we can know how to edit a movie, but how do you usually what's your approach to edit a trailer? Because I know nowadays there's special companies that dedicate to do trailers. So what's usually the difference between editing a movie? Well, of course, besides the dance and all that stuff, what's the difference between doing a trailer and a movie?
Well, I mean, I've sort of done both, because when I was starting out editing, I started working for Roger Corman in the trailer department. So after I had cut some features, I was looking for a next feature job, and Roger Corman needed people to first cut dialogue, so I was doing that, and then I was moved over to the trailer department. And trailers are their own special art. Some feature editors are great trailer cutters, and some aren't, because a trailer is more getting at what is the nugget of what the movie is about. You don't want to tell about the whole movie. You want to get to that period of time. So if you tell the whole story, it becomes a little bit boring. So you want to go for the emotion. You want to go for the central idea. And so what with the Grindhouse trailer, that was just pure, like, let's make this a Grindhouse trailer. Let's go back to some of the Isla old films from that period of time, and go for those German Grindhouse movies. Yeah. For a lot of the teaser trailers, and Rob and I we did the teaser trailer for Lords of Salem. We did the teaser trailer for The Devil's Rejects. It's more about really going, okay, let's tease the audience. Let's get at the feeling of what the movie's about, rather than telling them too much about what is the movie about, because you can't distill a whole film into a minute and a half without doing a bad job if you're trying to tell the whole story.
Yeah, well, no, speaking of length, not only you do trailers, cool trailers, by the way, and feature films, but you also do TV series. Most known probably has to be the Vampire Diaries. So when people think about the Vampire Diaries, even though they have found a way to excel, and to find their own roots, they tend, when they start out, everyone was just telling, "Oh, this is just a TV version of Twilight," So known for this violent and crazy, wild horror films. What I'm pretty quite curious. What led you to work on this TV series in particular?
Well, a few years ago, I was noticing that less and less independent features were being made, which is kind of unfortunate. But with streaming and with the change of the landscape for distributing movies, they were making fewer and fewer movies. So I was talking to my agents, and we decided it was important for me to start getting into TV series. So we were looking for something interesting, and the first thing that came along was editing Banshee, which was a really fun series to cut because it's just that series is all about sort of thinking outside the box in terms of editorial. There's jump cuts, there's lots of action scenes, there's flash forwards, there's intercutting between different scenes that are related in concept but in different locations, and so that was a lot of fun. And then Vampire Diaries was a totally different challenge because it's all about the emotion. It's all about caring about who what's happening to these characters and really stretching out the feelings of the emotion of these characters. And basically, when I come onto a TV series, I'm not imposing my style onto that TV series. It's very important that I don't cut an episode that looks different than other people's episodes. And so there's been brilliant editors on both those series. And so I look at what they've done in the past, and I try to echo what they do, but then go at it with my own perspective of what of pacing and what I feel is true to the storyline and what's true to the characters. With Vampire Diaries, one of the things that I hadn't dealt with a lot, although I had dealt with it a little bit with Rob, but it's Vampire Diaries is very music heavy, and there's a lot of source music. So it was all about trying to find interesting source music, and with Rob's movies, it was all about finding classic tunes. With the Vampire Diaries, it was all about the new stuff. And so the supervising editor, Tony Solomons, has an amazing mind for finding the best new trying to figure out what is going to be the next hit song before it's the hit song. And so everything has different challenges. The interesting thing also about TV is that you have a much shorter period of time. Sometimes on a feature we'll have 6 months, 8 months, and you just keep watching it over and over again, trying to hone it, trying to get it to that perfect length. Whereas with TV, usually they're shooting it in 10 days. We're delivering our cut 3 to 4 days after that with music, with sound effects. My assistants do amazing jobs with that, by the way. And getting that delivered in 3 to 4 days, then the director has another just 4 days to do his director's cut, and then the producers another 4 days. So it's a very compressed schedule. And so that also helps me sort of hone my craft by trying to think very much about what is my first instinct. And one thing that Rob Zombie has told me, which I think was really useful, was always go with your first instinct. Usually your first instinct is best. He had read a long time ago in a book that there's been studies, and your first instinct is usually your best instinct. And sometimes when you overthink things, you start muddying the waters and you start not making it as good. Speaking of that as well, sometimes if you polish something too much, if you make the edges too smooth, then if you're watching a movie or a TV show that's so polished, it becomes less interesting because it's not as exciting. Rob's always sort of told me, let some of the edges be a little bit rougher because it keeps it a little bit more real, a little bit more raw. Sometimes, like when you're listening to your favorite song, the best songs, the ones that live, they're a little bit edgier. They've got a little bit more, not necessarily edgier in terms of content, but they're a little bit more rough around the edges. Sometimes when things are so smooth, they might be popular for like a week or a month or a year, but they don't live on in the lexicon. You know, it's the things that are a little bit more unpredictable, the things that are a little bit rougher that seem to stand the test of time.
Yeah, no, I just had this on the deadline. How do you before that, before entering, the TV world, with Banshee, as you mentioned, and then with the Vampire Diaries, how do you knock that out, down, the deadline, the short deadline, how do you pull that out? As an editor, what are the cons and the pros about it? I know you mentioned some pros, but what?
Well, I mean, I'd say like the cons are, a lot of times when you finish an episode, it's good, but then when you go to the stage, like a little while later, you go, oh, I could have done that, or I could have tweaked that, and sometimes when you given your mind a chance to rest, sometimes you can look at something a little bit more objectively, and you can kind of see what you might have changed. Things might become more clear. When you're inside it, sometimes it's hard to see what's not working, and sometimes with that time you can step away, and when you step away, you can see what was working and what wasn't working. And so that sometimes is the unfortunate thing. It's great to go with your first instinct, but sometimes being able to step back makes it clear what might be standing out as not working. One of the reasons I think that there are editors and directors and we work so closely together is because an editor can be more objective sometimes than a director. When a director's on the set, he knows all these things that happen on the day that he shot a scene, and he might be like, "Oh, we can't get away with that because of this," and it's like, as from my standpoint, I might not have even noticed that, and so I can like look at it and go, "No, I don't think anyone's going to notice that. I didn't notice it, and now that you're pointing it out, I notice it, but I still don't think anyone's going to really see it." Or, he might have had problems with it, an actor being a real pain in the ass, and in that circumstance, he might be like, let's cut that out, and it'd be like, no, please, I know that actor might have driven you crazy, but at the same time, that we need that line of dialogue, we need that scene. You can't get rid of that, because then the audience is going to be a little bit lost, a little bit confused. I mean, one of the things with editing that somebody told me a long time ago, and it's very true, when I edit a scene, I'm always trying to think, where does the audience want to be at any given moment? and really trying to put myself into the mind of the audience and sort of go, okay, I think that I should cut here because that's what the audience is sort of wanting. That's what their desire is pulling them toward. So I think that when I do something like that, I'm either giving them exactly what I think that they would want, or I'm holding that information back for a reason to sort of make the journey a little bit more mysterious. It's always that sort of push and pull of giving the audience what they want and then not giving them what they want, but being very specific about it. No cuts should just be arbitrary. Every cut should have a reason for being. Sometimes it's just to keep the pace going, but it shouldn't be, oh, I should just cut here because I haven't cut for a while. It should always be based on what you should have a good reason for making every cut.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's definitely something that editing class, those who are going to film school know very well, always know how to edit. So, you mentioned the music, and in this case, the Vampire Diaries, how the use of new music. We got shows like, Screen and stuff like that, where they also use a lot of music, and sometimes it gets kind of annoying. So, how do you work that out, especially when it comes, not to the score, to the music composer score, but to the current music? How do you kind of balance both the chords and the music as an editor?
I think that first of all, you want it to work. You want the project, the piece, to work as well as it possibly can with no music. So I really first try to make every scene play without music. If it plays without music, it's going to play even better with music, because music can sometimes be a Band-Aid. So when going through it, I'm really trying to cut without any music at first and watch the scenes and watch the piece without music. Then what I do is I try to go, okay, what moments need to be pushed a little bit? What moments can be elevated? And music can emotionally really cue us in subconsciously to the thoughts and feelings of the characters. So then it's like, okay, let's start bringing in the music here, because at this point, the audience is going to want to feel something more. And then as far as score versus source being an actual song, a lot of times songs work better when you're intercutting different scenes together. Sometimes to unify like 2 or 3 different storylines that are going on at the same time, a song can help join them together, almost in a way that sort of strings them tightly together. And also with score, also with source, when you're doing a montage, a lot of times montages play really well with songs. And then, for instance, I have a movie that I'm cutting now, American Satan, where it's about the rise and fall of a heavy metal band, and that's all about music. And because the band is about music, music drives the whole thing. And so with a movie like that, you almost want the songs to be the score. So sometimes you play songs as score, and so with something like that, the songs are sort of telling the story of who these characters are.
Yeah, sure. Well, now speaking about the actual job you're working on, I'm pretty sure many people have been looking at the screen behind you, and they have been wondering, how. Okay, we see all this great knowledge you have given us, but how. I believe we will all agree here that we would like to see you on action, if that's cool with you.
Sure. I mean, I've always said that sometimes editing, when you watch somebody edit, it's like watching paint dry because it's a very slow process. Sometimes when I'm cutting dailies, sometimes it will take me all day to cut 2 or 3 minutes. But I'll show a little bit of what I do. This particular software is Premiere. I generally cut on Avids, but on this project we decided to cut on Premiere. Basically, when I'm cutting on Avid, I have things in bins so you can visually sort of see what each shot is. And I have those bins generally laid out with where those shots fall within a scene. But when I'm cutting a scene, I'll generally start with the script. I'll read the script, the scene that I'm going to cut, maybe 2 or 3 times, really start to think about what is actually being said by the characters, what's the subtext of the scene, how does it relate to the scenes before and after it. And then I'll go through, these are my reels, and I'll go, okay, here's a dialogue scene, and I'll decide, okay, here I want to sort of establish where they are. A lot of times when I'm starting a scene, I don't want to start with an establishing shot. A lot of times here, it's a little tricky. I don't want to show you too much because I don't want to give away the movie. But
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll try to start with something that's not an establishing shot and sort of then build up to the establishing shot to sort of have a little bit of mystery so the audience can guess where we're going with the establishing shot. And it's all about, like, here I want to sort of go to, okay, I don't want to go right to the close-up because I kind of want to sort of see how they are in relationship to each other. And then
plans for Hellfest.
And it's all about, also when I'm cutting, I try with dialogue and certain things to sort of cut, like, it's all about a dance. And when I'm cutting dialogue, dialogue has its own waveforms. And so when you're editing dialogue, if you cut here or here, that's like right in the middle of somebody talking really high. And that's going to be more noticeable and be a harder cut than if you cut like right before the person talks. This makes the cut more prominent. This also is sort of right in between 2 lines of dialogue. This, if you cut here, it's going to feel a little bit like you're wanting to hear that last thing of dialogue. So a lot of times with dialogue, I'll cut here, or I'll cut like as it's starting to go down, so that I can then get the reaction. And then if I'm cutting like an action scene or I'm cutting an argument, then I'll like cut on these because then it will feel much more like it's head to head. It's harder. I want the cuts to be abrasive. I want them to sort of to jump out. And a scene like this, what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll go through and I'll be like, okay, this scene starts here. The first line of dialogue, I'll put a head mark. And then I'll go to the next shot and I'll go to that same line and I'll hit it. I'll do a head mark. And then that next line, that same exact line, to put a head mark. And I'll do that for every single shot and then what I'll do is I'll watch it, and when I cut, it's all based on performance. And so I'll go, what is the very best performance? Or what are the 2 or 3 best performances? And then based on that, then I'll go, okay, for this particular line, these 3 takes were the best. Now, what angle sort of tells the story that most echoes that particular line? So when I go through and I edit a scene, I take a lot of time because I'm like listening to every single line on every single take that is pertinent to that line. Not only if it's shoulder, but if it's like on somebody's face, I'll listen to every single line and then choose based on the performances or based on where I want that scene to go, choose that line. Then I'll go to the very next line, do the same thing. And so it's a process of really sort of crafting what is the best performances, where do I want to be, and what is the scene about. And then I'll also sort of think about like, okay, now as far as where I want to cut, it's all about a dance. I'm choreographing a dance. So do I go right after a blink? Sometimes that hides a cut, or right before a blink, sometimes that hides a cut. Or do I not go around a blink? Do I go with a look? What about a little bit of the turn of the head? I like cutting, right as a character moves, or right, after a character moves. Sometimes that sort of hides the cut. I mean, what I'm usually trying to do is I'm trying to make my art invisible. I'm trying to really sort of hide what I'm doing because I want the audience to feel like they're immersed in that story, that they're actually sitting at the rainbow, at that booth with those characters and listening to what's going on. So if I make my process while I'm cutting too out there, then people will go, oh, I'm watching a movie. I want them to feel like they're actually in the story, that they're actually in the scene. But that's not always the case. Sometimes, sometimes you want the art to actually be on the surface. For instance, there was a brilliant movie that I just thought was brilliantly cut, and it's escaping me now. That was done last year. I'm trying to think of it right now. I don't know why I'm spacing on the name of it. What? Yeah, The Big Short. And
The Big Short.
That movie is brilliantly cut, but you can see the artifice of the editing throughout. And so, but that movie calls for you to see the editing. It actually, because it's a satire on what happened with the banking system, that's actually going, here, come with me. That's why the characters there are breaking the fourth wall so much, because it's actually putting its arm around you and going, hey, look how this happened. And so every film is a little different. I know, like, Rob goes for a lot of handheld in his movies, but then with Lords of Salem, we purposely kept everything much more on sticks and much more and everything much more framed in a style, because that was all about trying to evoke the classic structure of like a Kubrick style or something like that.
Awesome. So, all right. So, well, that's a lot. Okay, it's all right. Well, so I think we're running out of time. But before that, I want to thank you for all the great knowledge. Definitely, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get many of us got tips out of it. Now got some to learn more. So for those who didn't know about editing so much, and maybe who knows, personally, I was always wanted to be a director, but after I started doing my own editing, definitely that drove me. And the fact of storytelling. As you have been telling throughout the whole interview, the way how does in some way the editor is like the screenwriter and the director at the same time, kind of like why some directors and people start and editors start fighting over, but so yeah, the way how to build a story. And so for those who might be interested in becoming editors, what would be your final words for them? How would you encourage them? Maybe they are not sure, because there's people that wants to be something in the movie field, but maybe they are just waiting for that final push. Maybe they aren't that sure. What would be the final word? How would you encourage them? Maybe dive into the editing world. Maybe what would they require to become an editor and stuff like that?
Well, I'd say this. I mean, editing, one of the things I love about editing is you get so many aspects of the film. It's all about story. It's all about trying to find the best performances. So it's all about acting. It's all about also camera and what are the best camera angles and what are the best moving cameras shots to put together. It's all about music. It's all about trying to evoke all the emotion through the music. It's all about figuring out visual effects and speaking about visual effects. It's about sound effects and how the sound effects are going to affect the picturescape. It's all about so many aspects. And the one wonderful thing about editing is you're always learning. Nothing gets boring because you're always working on different and new scenes. Each scene has its own challenges. Each scene is different. And then the other great thing is you're working really closely with the director. And one thing that you've probably noticed that I talk about a lot is more about, the story and the characters rather than the process of like working with the tools.
Yeah.
But whether you're working with Premiere or Final Cut or Avid or whatever, those are just tools. They're basically different cars. They'll all get you to the same destination. It's what you do with those tools. And so one of the wonderful things about editing is it's super creative. And if you're sort of into being creative, if you're sort of like wanting to almost like an architect or a choreographer or even a writer, what you're doing is you're writing with images rather than words, and so you're really getting into the psyche of the art.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of the images, it's like in some way to be a photographer, you have to be in some way. Will you say you have to be, will you say a good editor needs to know a lot about photography too?
Yes, a good editor should know about all aspects of film. To be a good editor, you really should understand all the different aspects of film. You're a filmmaker, not just an editor. And the better filmmaker you are, the better storyteller you are, the better editor you're going to be.
Yeah, it's almost like in some way, and someone who wants to be an director, an editor, sorry, and it needs to know in some way the same things as a director. Know the whole aspect of the whole filmmaking, as you say. So, well, I think that's it. Thanks a lot for opening this great festival. Definitely, hopefully in the future, this will be remembered. This great festival was a great festival, and you will be marked in the history of filmmaking as the opening act of the festival.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. So, well, thanks everyone for watching the conference, and take look out for to our channels on Facebook, Frame by Sound. Also look for Glenn Garland. I know he's on Twitter, at Glenn Garland. I'm pretty sure he's gonna ask awesome tips for you if you have more questions. And thanks a lot. See you guys all Sunday. Hasta la vista.